Hey there, Tim from ModelKitReviews.com, and today, little SD gun tank and I are going to be building a Haro kit from our Generation Zero SD grab bag kits. Now, if you remember from a previous video, I showed these off. I'm going to be doing a panel at AnimeFusion here in Minneapolis, talking about Playmo, Gunpla, and all the fun things that are really great about the hobby, giving a presentation on it, and then also having an open discussion panel and a bunch of kits to show off. And one of the giveaways I'm going to have is I bought a sealed box of 81 of these mystery things. You don't know which one you're getting, and it's actually of these guys here. So all of these various little mini, and hopefully the light plays well with us, little mini SD kits. We've got this really cool Psycho Gundam on top of a die. There's actually a reason for that. And you know, all these little various little, you know, mini monster versions. But the one that really stuck out to me that would be really cool is this Haro kit. And you can see from there, it's pretty basic. It's exactly what you'd expect. Just a spherical object with panel lighting in there. And I actually opened one of these up, and we'll take a look at it. So this is what the contents of that bag were. Here is a Haro. And you actually have, so you have the front of the face, you have the bottom half of it, so there's actually a hinge mechanism that is able to, so this thing's able to swing open. Then you've got the back of the top of the sphere comes together in two pieces, and I actually show you the instructions here, right there. And so by the time you're done, as you can imagine, you have a giant seam line that goes right across the top of the kit, or right there, and then you have giant seam lines that go right down the back of the kit right there, and we want to get rid of those. Because my goal is I want to have a Haro on display on a little stand right by the box of these, because these are just going to be in a giant box and you just reach in and get whatever one you get, so that you can't sit there and feel them all. So my goal is I want to have one of these kind of sitting there next to it, kind of like a, hey, check this out, like this is what you get, and if you put the time in, it can look really good. And I figured, you know, if someone's this is their first model kit kind of exposure, or they've never really taken the next step with giving their kits that really good finished look, it'll be kind of a neat thing for them to see, is that, hey, this silly little free thing I'm giving you can look this cool if you want to put the time and effort in. Now, maybe a little ridiculous, I'm putting in like hours of work on a micro SD kit giveaway, but it's still fun, right? It's all about the building. So we've got our little guy there, and I've actually already started one of these. Here's my Haro. And you can see I've already gone through and removed the seam lines, and sadly I didn't film it because I was just kind of goofing around with it before I realized how far I was taking this, and I figured I should film it. We've already gone through and started scribing out the side details, because as you can see, the molded ones, it's not all that great. So I've gone through and actually bringing these plates out, and I will show that on here. One of the other things I've done is I've got Milliput in there to seal this up, because before it was just a bunch of connector pieces, and I want to have this so you can open the mouth and have all this painted black, like in the, similar to what you saw in the anime. When you opened it up, you didn't see a bunch of connector pieces, you actually saw just a big black fill there. So I'm going to do that, but we still have the bottom jaw to do, and I'll talk about that in a second. But first, let's take a look at some of the tools that we're going to need to do this kit up. So the first thing I did was obviously glue it together. I prefer Tamiya's extra thin cement. And then from there, I did Mr. Surfacer to take care of any surface details. This is 1000. You can use whatever grain you like. I like 1000. It's a nice middle ground. Then to fill in gaps and whatnot, we're using Mr. Putty, liquefied putty. And then also Milliput for actually filling in the top and bottom details. We're going to need a hobby knife. This is a X-Acto number 5 blade. It just happens to be what I have laying around. You can use whatever you want, as long as you got a nice, fine, sharp point. Speaking of sharp points, a scriber. Point scriber, mind you, not a line scriber, and that's going to be for digging out the pieces here. Now, one of the other things I'm going to do, as I said, is I want to have it on display, and how I'm going to do that is I reached into my little jar of bits and bobs here. Now, any hobby shop worth their salt is probably going to have a bunch of these laying around. They're just little pieces of rods and whatnot. Usually they have a grab bag of them. I think I bought this whole thing for a grand total of $6, and this thing is fantastic if you want to make suppressors for the ends of rifles or anything like that. They're really good. But what we're going to do is, out of my bits and bobs, I found this cool little brass rod, and we're going to make a display base for our Haro. So once we got this guy done, we'll drill a small hole right in the bottom of it, stick him on there, and he'll be on display on a little base, and the head will still be able to open and close. We can pose it any way we want. That's one of the reasons I went with Milliput, is though it dries very rock hard, it's very, very sturdy, it's also not incredibly heavy. And once we get paint on there, we can actually tighten that joint up quite a bit, or we can do it through a screw. So let's actually take a look. I think the first thing we're going to do is take a look at the Milliput. So let me get set up here, and we'll check that out. All right, so we're back and we've got our Milliput set up here. Now, if you're not familiar with Milliput, what it is, I actually use the superfine white. I just prefer it because it doesn't require as much sanding or filling to get a nice smooth surface. What Milliput is it's two-part epoxy putty. So in its normal form, in these tubes, very squishy, soluble, you can do whatever you want with it. But once you mix it together, you have about 3 hours before it turns rock hard, and I mean rock hard. But it bonds to plastic incredibly well, and it doesn't shrink as it dries, which is an important thing that you'll find a lot of other putties can't do properly. They will shrink as they dry. Now, previously I've shown this stuff here. I've actually got it in my little hobby drawer, the Vallejo plastic putty. Now this is an acrylic resin-based putty, and it's good for some things. It's not good for what we want to do with it. We're basically making a new part for this thing, so we're going to need that kind of rigidity that goes along with this. So the first thing we need to do is kind of decide how much we're going to need. So in this case, you know, you start smaller. It's always best to start small and add on little pieces as you need to. In this case, we got to be careful because this overlaps slightly, right? So you have this bottom jaw that kind of closes in on that, and you've got these little, like, almost teeth kind of things inside of there. We want to make sure we don't lose that, which means that we have to be very careful to not come up completely to the edge, lest we'll be doing a ton of sanding to try and get rid of it. Although I wonder if we could do that. It would still look about right. Well, you know what? Let's wing it and try it. But we also have to account for the fact any kind of hinges, and it looks like we're pretty clear. We probably could take this right up to the edge if you look in there and just have it all smoothed out. And that'll actually be good because it'll give us a nice, once, like I said, this is rock hard, so you can actually drill into it and do whatever you want. It'll give us a nice mounting surface for our brass rod that we're going to put inside of there. So, first thing we got to do is we have to cut off our amount of Milliput. Now, if you read the back of the box or the instructions that actually come in here, if you have sensitive skin, Milliput will irritate your hands. It's not considered toxic, it's just considered a skin irritant. It doesn't seem to bother my hands. I may have more calloused and ridiculous hands than a lot of other people, so your mileage may vary. But it's no big deal. Slap on a pair of rubber gloves and you're good to go. The most important thing, though, is wash your hands as soon as you're done working with it, because it actually, wedding ring's going to come off because that's not good either. This stuff, once it dries on your hands, it is very hard to get off, so keep that in mind. So, first up, we'll take this guy. This is our actual, this is the, I believe this is the more inert of the two, and we're going to slice off a bit of that. Now keep in mind, we're going to mix together equal parts, so you want to make sure that you know, it's going to be twice the volume, so whatever you cut off of that one, we're going to cut off an equal amount. So that looks about right for what we're going to be doing here. So let's cut off our next one, and actually we're going to wipe this off too, because if we're going to use this same little poker tool for cutting off the next one, we don't want to get the second part of the epoxy on it because it'll start hardening the end of it. So let's see here, we'll cut off about the same amount, which should be about this guy, and I believe this is the actual activator material. You can tell because it's a lot more malleable, it's a lot more kind of squishy. This is much drier. Alright, so now all I gotta do is mix these two together. And this is a really boring part, so bear with me. If I need to, I'll speed this up in post. Alright. Just kind of keep kneading it, just like you would anything else. Actually, the heat it gets from you kneading it with your hands is actually what's going to soften it up quite a bit, because this stuff is very soft when you're first using it. Now it is going to seem a bit dry, and that's okay, because the one thing Milliput is really good with is, let me get this wiped off before I forget about it, because again, if it dries on your tools, it will never come off. But Milliput is actually very reactive to water, and they actually mention that in the instructions. If anybody's familiar with sculpting with clay, and I have a lot of clay sculpting tools, it's actually where this comes from. If anybody's ever sculpted with clay, it's very similar to clay in that regard once you get it, except for the fact that once it hardens, it's rock hard, and you can drill it, you can chisel it, you can do whatever you want with it, and it's the odds of it shattering are very, very slim. All right, this looks about good. So let's, the other nice thing is it cleans up with just water and soap, so no big deal. So it's actually okay if we get it all over our model. So the first thing we want to do is we'll kind of drop that in there and see the lay of the land, see where we're at. And I think we're looking pretty good. If we smooth that around, I think it'll fill this area quite nicely, because what I'm going to try and accomplish here is, much like I did with the top, where it kind of ramps and just makes a very smooth kind of meeting with the edge, I'm going to try and do the same thing in the bottom. Now, as I said, like you want to go in it first, and you want to just kind of squish it around the edges. Maybe get it around that hinge piece so we can hide that, because the bottom hinge has that support piece of plastic, which makes sense because it actually gives some structural strength to that hinge. But we can surround the edges of that and kind of hide that a bit. All right, so now is where a little bit of water comes in, just a little bit of water on the tip of your finger, and smooth around. You can see that instantly that Milliput becomes very malleable. And it's really good if you're going to do exactly what I am, which is you're trying to smooth around the edges. Alright, now we're getting somewhere. Now we can actually start smoothing up around the edge. It does dry out quick, no big deal. Just get a little bit more water on your finger and you're back in business. So again, it's a lot like clay. If anybody out there has actually done any sculpting with clay, same kind of thing. As it starts to dry out, get a little bit more water on your hand and then just start smoothing the surface out. Saves you a lot of work down the road. We're going to be sanding this anyway, but if we can take care of a lot of the smoothing now, why not, right? All right, that looks about good. I'd say it's pretty good. Now it's okay to have it run over the edges a little bit because we'll be able to clean that up with a paper towel. But if you want to, you can smooth it up a bit, just like that, with the tip of your finger. Same thing on the other side. And again, it's okay if we're getting on the surface because it'll wash right off of water as long as we get it before it dries. All right, that looks pretty good. I'm actually really happy with how that was. A lot easier than I thought it was going to be. The top was a little bit more difficult because there was a lot of bits and pieces that were sticking up because of the kind of structural connectors that are in there. But this bottom piece is just one big part, so it actually worked out pretty well. Cool. All right, so there we go. Now the kind of key is that we'll have to let that dry for a while. But look, we have a Haro that actually has the inside of his mouth filled. It's kind of fun. And it does still close. We want to test that before it dries, right? Because if we want to make any changes. And now it's actually good because he doesn't have any weird overbite. Now it actually meets pretty much perfectly like you'd expect. All right, cool. Hey, all right, so here we are. We're waiting for the this Haro to dry. It's a couple hours later. It's still not quite there, but it's getting there. Probably another hour and a half. In the meantime, though, we could actually start working on the base we're going to do. Now, I talked about previously what we're going to do is we're going to have that metal rod that sticks into the bottom here, and we'll drill the hole for that. Oh, got a little bit of Milliput I missed down there. We'll be drilling a hole in the Haro right about there once the Milliput is done drying, and then mounting it onto a base. And I took around different materials. I was going to use some pla plating I had here. I was going to cut out like a 1-inch square, something like that. Actually, I was going to cut out a 3x3 square to have enough surface area to kind of support them. And then I remembered I had a bunch of this. I think this is 1/8-inch plexiglass, and I guess it's not plexiglass. It's just acrylic plating laying around. And I figured I can make a base for that. And because of the weight of the figure versus the surface area of the acrylic, I could do a 1-inch square, and it would have enough structural integrity to kind of support the character, right? So when we get our brass piece on there, which is in my hand, put that on there, we'll have this cool, you guys can't see that at all, but we'll have this cool base for him to rest on. All right, so we're back. Got all the sides chamfered down. It's all very nice and not going to cut anybody. And again, this is for, I'm building this specifically for this convention. It's not going to be looked at super closely. I'm not building this, you know, to enter in a contest or anything like that. So I can be kind of, you know, I don't have to be as you know, crazy with it as I normally would be. However, it is looking pretty good. I try to get it as even as possible, just eyeballing it with my jeweler's files here. So that being said, when I was trying to find center, I mean, you can actually go through and measure it, but it's like I eyeballed this entire thing, so it's 1 inch by 1 inch, or at least it was when I first measured on the T-square. I haven't checked it again, and I don't know, you know, these edges might not be perfectly straight anymore, but again, I don't really care so much because it's going on a completely free Haro model kit that I'm putting too much time into already. And so all I did to find center is, instead of measuring and actually defining it that way, I just took 2 pieces of blue tape, crossed them over from corner to corner, and then wherever they meet up, we're going to call that center. So now that we have that, all you got to do is take your pin vise. I want to make sure I actually get this close to the center, which would be, by my guess, right about there. And then we just twist it in. So we're back. We've got our cool little base. We've got the brass rod inserted into it, and what is since I drilled all the way through, I was able to just push the rod, and it was a straight cut in the rod as far as I was concerned. So there we go. We have this neat little base that Haro can sit on. Speaking of Haro, the inside bottom is just about dry. Certainly dry enough where we're not going to hurt it if we want to do some testing with it. And you can see I've already gone in and drilled out a hole to mount him into. It's not that deep yet because the Milliput is not perfectly dry. Once it is, I can make the hole a little deeper. But I also wanted him to be removable. So I didn't go too far into it, but it does line up. This is just a cursory fit. And look at that. Haha. Haro on a stand. Pretty sweet. We can have his mouth open. Because again, the Milliput certainly is not the heaviest thing in the world. I mean, this thing does have some heft to it now. Much heavier than it was originally. But yeah, now we have this neat little stand and put him up next to all the other stuff. Let me zoom the camera in, that way you guys can actually see it in its home. But yeah, so there's our little Haro on the stand. I'm pretty happy with that. And you can have his mouth open to any amount you want. He might fall when he gets to there. I can always, as I said, I can put a retaining screw in there. But that looks kind of silly anyway. I think at most his mouth would be open about that far. Probably closed more often than not. Alright, so we're back on Haro. It's been about a day later from the last video here. And you can see we now have beautifully solid internal pieces covering up all of that stuff. So it actually looks much more realistic. Well, realistic, I should say accurate. Realistic, come on. But definitely accurate to the anime. And it added a nice bit of heft to the model as well, which is pretty cool. So there's our stand. I got it all taped off, masked off, so we don't have to worry about damaging that acrylic anymore. Because when I paint it, I'll actually have him stuck onto the base like that, because this being a brass rod, I can just polish that off. No big deal. But we've gone through and let me pop him off there really quick. Gone through and I've scribed out using our trusty scriber and an X-Acto knife. Scribed out all these circles to add some depth to them. Still got some remnants of plastic on there. Top and bottom. And then you can see like the little scratch there. That's just because as I was going around making small mistakes here and there. And then covered the entire guy with Mr. Surfacer, which I let sit for a few hours, and then ended up sanding most of it off, as you do with Mr. Surfacer, and that left a nice smooth surface. All the seam lines are effectively completely gone at this point, which is great. The only thing that's left is I got to finish scrubbing out this guy right here. And if you've seen any of my previous scribing videos, it's the same kind of idea. Just put the scriber in there and just start digging out. Don't need to go too hard. Because then you start taking the chance of making mistakes. Best to have a light touch, and that way if anything happens where you slip like I just did, you haven't dug down too far and you can always fix it later. Alright, here we are. Haro is ready to rock. We got all this stuff, we got all this, the Mr. Surfacer on there, and then we sanded a bunch of it off, and you can see a bunch of spots still on there, but it's alright. It is all perfectly smooth. All seam lines are filled and accounted for. The interior where we put in Mr. Dissolve Putty filled in all those other gaps nicely. You can see a little splotch right there with it's a combination of Mr. Putty, Mr. Surfacer. But looking great. The mouth is able to open and close perfectly. Fantastic. Let's get some primer on this guy and get this thing painted. Alright, here we are, fresh off the spray booth. We have little Haro here. Let me get the light in close. So you can see we've got the nice green on there. Waiting for that to cure. So again, with the Tamiyas, I flattened it out. I didn't put any flat base in there, but oh, excuse me. Since it was a gloss paint as the primary, I actually thinned it with alcohol, which flattens the paint out if you're airbrushing it. There's a helpful tip if you haven't heard that one before. If you actually thin your Tamiyas with alcohol rather than Tamiya thinner, it does dull them out quite a bit. And I got a little bit, not really, I don't know what you really call it a problem. You can see the texturing on there. It's a little bit of, I don't want to say orange peel, but just kind of like a dry flaking. But I kind of dig it. I think it's actually going to work out well because this character is going to get a healthy amount of gloss coats as soon as this is done drying and then curing. All right, we're going through, we're in the final stages of Haro. Right now we're just doing some quick panel line washes. I'm using Vallejo's Game Color Wash, their green shade. I normally mix my own washes, but in this case I actually chose not to since I'm working fast and I wanted something that was really durable without having to go through and worry about doing another gloss coat. Because usually with my own washes, what I do is a mix of tube-based watercolor and mix that in with some airbrush cleaner from my Wada Medea, because it's like a kind of a dish soap consistency, and just do that and you actually end up with these fantastic washes. Here's one now. That work a lot like an enamel wash, where you would use lighter fluid mixed with enamel, put it on, and then you can wait a month and come in and take it off with just lighter fluid. Well, this is the exact same thing, except it comes right off with a damp Q-tip. It's fantastic. But in that case, they're very fragile, and you do have to go back and do another gloss coat. I'm up against the clock, unfortunately. I don't have time for that. So I wanted something that I can just, you know, get on there, clean it off, put a matte coat on top, and call it good. So that's why we're using the Vallejo Game Color washes. And the shade of it's perfect for what I'm doing, so it's saving the trouble of having to mix up my own. And you can really see the difference. Like, so there's the unpanel lined, there's the green wash inside of it, and it really just looks cool. And it looks better than if you were to use a black panel wash, because a black panel wash just looks like you just put a black outline. This actually looks like a natural shading of the piece itself. All right. Coming up on the end. This is the exciting part where you're like, I'm almost done. If I just get this wash done, I can put a matte coat on top of this guy and call it a day. Although I was debating on a matte coat. I think I was actually wondering if it would look cool if I just left it gloss, but at the same time, I don't know. Never been a big fan of glossy kits. I did my Tiger and Bunny in gloss, but not this guy. I think we'll definitely, maybe a satin. We'll see. The world is my oyster. Plus it's a model kit, I can do whatever I want, right? Anyway, all right, so there we go. Completely panel lined. We'll let this dry, go back, do a little cleanup if necessary with some alcohol and a Q-tip. But by and large, I think we are pretty close to done. Right, the moment we've all been waiting for. Here's our Haro, obviously the unpainted one. This is one I freshly built because I do want to have a, I'm going to put a little before and after. It's like, hey, turn this into this kind of thing. So this is a straight build. See all the wonderful stuff we've got inside of there showing, and the bottom. Change the light so you guys can actually see. So we've got, yeah, all the structural stuff totally visible. You've got giant seam lines going down the top of the head. Just really, I mean, it's a 2000 model kit that was designed as a freebie piece of garbage. But here's the cool thing. Ta-da! The finished version. Here's mine. So see, we've got him affixed to his base, a little brass rod there. Got the panel lining in place. I ended up going with a matte coat. I just think it looks kind of cool. We did the yellow eyes instead of red because I just think it looks better myself. Hey, it's modeling. It doesn't have to be accurate, right? It just needs to look good. So yeah, I'm really happy with it. And you can see, we open up the mouth on my Haro, and we can see one that I got a little bit of scraping in the back, but that's no big deal. The mouth would never be open this far. But you can see we've got that all filled in with Milliput, looking cool compared to, you know, what the original kit was. I think we did. I think I did a pretty fantastic job on covered all that up. Now, granted, this is probably a lot further than any normal human being would really be willing to take a throwaway SD kit. But I kind of looked at it as like, hey, I don't have to concern myself with too much assembly stuff, so I can actually get in and get crazy with just making it look as cool as possible, like just putting a ton of fit and finish into it. And it all still moves, so that's no problem. Again, I use water-based acrylics on it, so it's not the most durable thing in the world, but you know, it has its little base, and there it shall sit right next to this guy, and I can say, take this and turn it into this. So, and I went with a little more of a minty green. I know the Haro they show on this sheet is like all grassy color, and there's different Haros. Like if you watch Gundam 00, they have like a red and a purple one, I think. I went with more of just a minty green. I think it looks cool, a little softer kind of look to it. So there you are. Thanks for checking this out. I had a really good time with this kit. I might actually have to spend some time. I still have my little Psycho Gundam on a die I could do. Who knows? I'm not making any promises. But these quick build videos are a lot of fun. So anyway, please like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Tell your friends that Haro is, you know, the building tutorial for. And that was really cheesy. I'm sorry about that.
Anyway, thanks for watching, everybody, and until next time, we'll talk to you later.